guys, welcome back to $40 in Paris. Today we have me, Alondra Arias, and
Megan Pugh.
Yep, we're here today, and what are we going to be talking about, Megan?
So as we get closer to, holiday break, so Thanksgiving and winter break, we wanted to talk to you all about how to deal with not necessarily problematic family members, but how to have difficult conversations, conversations that you really might not want to have.
And they usually always have to do with politics, current events. There's a lot going on in our political climate right now. So it's definitely easy to fall into those conversations. And there are going to be a lot of different reactions to those conversations, especially dealing with sexual orientation or your gender identity.
Yeah, so that's our big question today is how do we deal with those interactions? How do we create conversation out of that conflict? And if we can't do that, how do we cope and how do we navigate those situations while we're at home? So the first thing that we want to do is say that, some of the things that we're about to talk about, we recognize that those options that we're going to give on how to navigate these situations, they aren't realistic for everyone. And we understand that everybody's home situation is different, but we want to encourage you to keep those things in mind either way as we continue with our conversation today.
So what are some conversations that we're expecting to come up in the household?
I assure you all, it does not change the older you get. Even when I go home for holiday breaks, I have the conversation, where's your boyfriend? Ooh, maybe we should hit the gym. I know you work in multicultural affairs, but what is that? So like Alondra said earlier, we have all of those things, like all of these political and social conversations absolutely come up for me. Alondra, what are some things that you all end up talking about at your house?
It's mostly, it always comes back down to political stuff. We always sit down, have the news playing. So we'll see the headline of immigrant children, being held. Just really hard stuff that is difficult to talk about, especially with my background. It definitely hits close to home.
One thing that we wanted to talk to you all about is how could you address differences of opinion regardless of what those conversations are about? One thing that I like to try to do is consider is this even really worth fighting over? Do I have the energy to have this conversation? But also, is it something that when I'm having this conversation, I'm going to think about, no, I have to win this argument? Or is it something that I'm actually able to have a conversation about and, resolve the conflict?
It's always easy to fall in, in the heat of the moment, you hear a trigger that is just something that is passionate for you and that you want to talk about. Or sometimes you don't want to talk about it, which is totally okay also. But most of the times for me, I do want to talk about it and engage in that conversation. But I really have to ask myself, based on this person's prior background, do I really want to be able to get into this conversation? And am I am I willing to listen to their opinion and their point of view? Because they aren't obligated to come over to your side and agree with everything that you're saying. And you have to be willing to work around that and, try and see their perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not a good negotiator. I'm not if I feel a type of way about something, I'm so headstrong and I struggle a lot even now, with being okay disagreeing with someone, because a lot of times I'll be having a conversation, it's about something that is very personal to me. Even with my my close friends, we have a lot of conversations about what our experiences are. For myself as a Black woman, what has been my experience in society, right? And so I'm always on edge. My defense is up. I'm ready to fight. So yeah. I really have to try hard to be willing to be flexible about things and to negotiate and to understand that my experience is not someone else's experience, and I have to be okay with that. I don't have to be okay with what their opinion is, right? I'm a firm believer that opinions can be wrong. They like to tell you they can't, but in my case, I think that they can. But just being okay having the conversation versus trying to persuade someone that my perspective is better or is right, because typically that doesn't happen. You're not going to change their minds, to be honest.
Yeah. That also kind of goes back to like, you also don't have to have that conversation at all if you don't want to have it. Be willing to be able to just say, okay, I do know this person. I don't think I'm going to get anywhere with it.
Yeah, for sure. I think with that, like, I believe in self-care and I believe in setting boundaries. And so being able to recognize like someone else is not willing to negotiate. Like, obviously I've mentioned that's me most of the time, but in other cases you're talking to folks who have been given this ideology, have believed these ideologies and these things for most, if not all of their lives. So you have to be okay saying, maybe this won't be something that we resolve. And sometimes it is best to just step away from the conversation if you know that there's not going to be any constructive dialogue there, which I think goes back to our first point, is just really trying to figure out, is this particular topic worth fighting over?
There's no responsibility of the oppressed to educate anyone else. That's not a requirement at all. It definitely is a kindness, I guess. But yeah, if you're feeling drained by that, then there's no need to engage, and that's fine.
One thing I do like to remind everyone of, even myself, when I'm feeling exhausted or I'm feeling like I don't want to have this conversation, is conflict. I'm not against conflict. I think conflict is good. I think conflict can very easily be turned into a teachable moment in a space where you can actually have a dialogue. I think a lot of times when we talk about social justice, especially, that is the point. Like, the point is not in social justice to create end outcomes that only benefit one side of whatever the situation is. When we talk about social justice, that means being able to co-collaborate and co-create an outcome that benefits everyone, even if those benefits are different and even if those things look different for every party. And so, when we're having these conversations, I think it's important to realize that, like, both parties or whoever is involved in the conversation has responsibility to create that dialogue. So just in terms of when you're having these conversations, Alondra, and, you're upset and you're, feeling a way about the conversation, what are some things that you try to do if you still want to have that conversation? So if you're not at a place yet where you're like, okay, I'm done with it, I'm walking away from it, what are some things that you like to do to change that conflict, that moment of conflict, into a teachable moment?
I think I mostly would try to give personal examples, of like how these big issues have like affected me personally, because I think whenever you do bring in that perspective of like, oh, this is an actual person that I know who has been affected by something going on in the news, then it becomes a lot more personal, and it suddenly is like, oh, this is affecting now a person that I know. So like, I think there's more stake in that.
I definitely think, especially, and I 100% agree about bringing in personal examples. I think it's much harder for people to be rude when they know they're talking about someone specific. I also like to remind myself, like, my first reaction is to respond. Like, I'm listening to you only to give you a response if I'm upset. So I think the big thing for me is like not creating more of a hostile situation. Like, if I know that I'm already on edge and I'm already like, oh my gosh, why am I even having to have this conversation? I really try to do my best not to interrupt the other person, not to respond defensively, more often than not, because I don't like anyone saying, well, you were the reason that we had the fight.
Yeah, you brought it up.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I really do try, to be as, not objective, but to be as calm as I can. And that doesn't mean all the time that I don't react, because I do. But I think moving away from reacting to responding is something that is really important. But also, I have had to learn how to articulate what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. I think so often in these conversations, we don't want to feel vulnerable. We don't want to feel weak. So we never say like, you hurt my feelings when you said this, or I felt attacked when you did this. So I really try to share those things clearly to see if there's common ground, like to see if I've misunderstood someone. Like, I might be feeling hurt, but they might be also. So just trying to sort of keep that option open for everyone involved.
I tend to stay away from using those words of like, oh, I feel attacked, I feel triggered, you know, you don't want to have that risk of being called out as a snowflake, and I'm saying that in quotes.
Right.
So yeah, I mostly try to stay away from that, because where I come from, that's definitely an accusation that you get frequently. Oh, get over it. Why are you being so sensitive? Like, it's not that big of a deal.
For sure.
If I was being sensitive about it, I would be crying, you know, on my knees. It's not that I am being sensitive or anything. It's that, you know, most of the time I'm not actually. I'm taking it in. I'm, you know, internalizing it. And I don't talk about it. And it's just like another slap in the face whenever you're told that you're being too sensitive about something.
Right.
So yeah, for me, is trying to, I guess, protect myself in a way. I do stay away from using like certain language around folks that I know might not be willing to engage with that type of language. So,
for sure, I think that's actually a really good point. I think understanding like your circumstances and being aware of your environment. Like, if my vulnerability at this moment is only going to cause me more stress, then maybe this isn't the time to have, you know, to tell folks how I'm feeling. If I know that, you know, I'm talking to folks who might use that against me later, maybe this isn't the person that I want to share those things with. And I think, you know, preparing to be in those spaces is really helpful. I think a lot of times we, you know, find ourselves in spaces that we aren't prepared to be, and so we don't really know how to respond. We don't really know how to engage with people during those times. So I think really being intentional about preparing yourself to be in those spaces that might be hostile for you or might be uncomfortable for you is really important.
I always feel like after the holiday breaks and everything, everyone's like, yeah, I just really figured out who I vibe with and who I don't.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. But
like, what is your energy?
Yeah.
Okay? What are you bringing into my space?
You gotta distance yourself. Sometimes, not all the times, but
right.
Yeah.
So I think, like, thinking about that, so I do believe in energy. I believe that people can bring bad vibes, and it like messes up your day. You know what I'm saying? So in that same vein, like, what are some ways that we can share to help folks practice, and ourselves, help everyone practice self-care and maintain boundaries if they feel like they're in a situation that isn't healthy for them or isn't conducive to their well-being?
For me, because I have been in these types of situations before, and I really just like to take a break from it all. Like, you know, whether that's like in the immediate physical space, so I'll distance myself from this awkward family dinner that we're having. Okay, I'm gonna, you know, head to my room now and see ya. Or sometimes if I am on social media or something, I'll usually, and you know, like a lot of the times it's conversations that are like happening a lot online too, because you know, everyone's home, everyone's, you know, on their phones. There's no school to distract us. But yeah, I'll oftentimes see it again, not only like in my family conversations, but I'll also see it online. So if I have to like distance myself from that, then I will do that too. You know, take, you know, a little social media break if I need to. Or sometimes I'll just be like, hey, I'll hit up a friend from back home and I'll be like, hey, let's, you know, go out to eat or something. Someone that I know is also, you know, on the same wavelength as I am in terms of like, you know, whether that be political spectrum or just like ideologies in general. Having that support system, being back home and being in a place that you aren't in all year.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I'm good for going home, and because fun fact, I'm the closest to my hometown of all of the 3 siblings, so me and my 2 brothers. So usually I'm home by myself with my parents, and we tend to have different perspectives on a lot of things, which I think has a lot to do, I think, Alondra, you mentioned this earlier, with like upbringing and just general background. Yeah. And so I'm very much protective of my peace. I tell people all the time, my peace is too expensive and I have no money. So it's not something that I'm willing to budge on. I think I've gotten very good, or at least I hope so, of creating boundaries for myself. So if I do find myself in a situation where, you know, I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling frustrated or upset, I'll leave the house. I'll go and see a movie by myself. People will tell you I'm good for a $5 Tuesday at the Carolina here in Asheville. And that's what I enjoy. I enjoy being able to go and be in solitude just for time to recharge. And I know that that's really important for me. Also, I love listening to true crime podcasts, y'all. Like, at this point, I'm pretty sure it's like a bad habit. You just have to be able to identify what your safe zones are, like in your hometown. If it's not your house, okay, where do your friends live? Where does your other family live? What are places that you like to go to be alone and recharge? Like, you really have to be, again, this idea of being intentional about taking care of yourself. And that includes taking care of yourself when you're in an environment that doesn't necessarily benefit you or you feel is averse to you doing better or doing well. Also, just like knowing what are the things that set you off. Like, I agree. I don't like to use the word triggers very often. But what are the things that you have a reaction about? And if you know what those things are, like as soon as they come up, nah, player, I'm not going to do it today.
Yeah. Like for me, it is usually around like, family settings where I have this more so than like friends or anything. So like for me, I also like to take an approach of like doing something with my family that kind of reminds me of like, oh, this is my mom and dad, this is my brother, this is my sibling, whatever. And so like just positive things that will remind me of like, oh, these are like actual human beings. Not to say that they're terrible. I love my parents, I really do. But just like watching a funny movie or something, or like going out on a walk, going Black Friday shopping.
Ooh, that's it right there.
Yeah. There's just moments that you want to have, memories that you want to create that like remind you that like, wow, I really love this person, I do want to see their perspective or whatever. So it's just like really helpful to me whenever those moments do come through. Just making sure I take that time to like appreciate them and what they have to offer to me, and vice versa.
Oh, that was good. Somebody write that down. I'm gonna write it down when I leave here. But no, yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. So often we get so caught up in like what the conflict is that we forget that we're talking to people who love us. We're talking to people who have always been there for us. Always. So this thing, depending on what it is,
hard,
right?
Because they love you and they care for you, and
But at the end of the day, that's the only family I got, or that's the one that I was given. So, hooray. So, as we prepare to leave UNC Asheville for Thanksgiving and winter break, we wanted to give you all some resources, both on campus and some things that you can utilize while you're at home to help you get through or prepare to get through what may be a really negative or difficult school break. So first thing, big thing, the Health and Counseling Center.
Yes.
Okay.
They are there. Make an appointment. Look out for your future self. If you're doing okay now, maybe that's a good time to set up that appointment. I know I've fallen into that trap of like, oh, I don't have any time. I'm dealing with all these different things right now. And I'm like, oh, I'll do it later. I'll make an appointment later. And then later comes and I am doing better and I'm like, oh, I don't need that. I don't need that service anymore. But I'm lying to myself. So definitely look out for yourself and like make appointments. Like the Health and Counseling Center is there.
Yeah, and also I just learned about this today actually while we were preparing for this podcast. We have here at UNC Asheville what's called Bulldog Health Link, and that's a 24-hour support line, a physical and emotional support line. So you can reach them at any time during your break at 1-888-267-3675. And just to repeat it so everybody has it, that's the Bulldog Health Link at 1-888-267-3675, and that's a 24-hour service, a 24-hour resource that you can definitely use if you're having a hard time while you're at home. Another thing is reaching out to Kokima Hines. She's a phenomenal professional here. Her background is in social work, but here at UNC Asheville, she's our student affairs case manager. She's involved with our care and crisis team. She meets with students regularly. She works with the dean of students. Like, her whole purpose of being at UNC Asheville is to make sure that you all are taken care of, that you're healthy, that you're going to class, that you have whatever it is that you need to make you successful here. You can reach Kokima at cking11, so CKING 11 at unca.edu to schedule an appointment. So I really do encourage you to reach out to Kokima in preparation for these upcoming breaks.
Another thing, connect with your friends. Talk to them, hit them up and be like, hey, how are you today? Have you eaten today? Make sure that they're taken care of so that they feel that they can connect to you and reach out to you in case you're not having the greatest time. But yeah, just make sure to share your feelings and your concerns with them.
Yeah, one thing I mentioned too, a couple of the groups that I work with in my role here at UNC Asheville is we are very much so in a scary time. Just in the last few weeks, we have seen different acts of violence and terrorism towards marginalized populations, whether that be in act or in legislation. So it is time now more than ever, if you haven't already, to make yourself available and vulnerable with the people that you care about and the people who share identities with you. It's really, really difficult to go through these things and experience these things alone, because a lot of us don't really know how to navigate these things because they're not happening to us, but they're happening to folks who look like us or who live in the same world that we do, or who have the same spiritual faith that we do. There are all of these things that tie us together. So it's really important to reach out, and it's also really important to reach back. I think that's it for us today, y'all.
Yeah. This is $40 in Paris.
And as always, keep those squares about your circle.